Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the LSU Tigers, the Tulane Green Wave. We got a great panel to break it down, as always. Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com and WGSO Radio, and Glenn Guilbeau came all the way down from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Of course, he does it for Gannett News to come down and join us. Of course, he's a Rummel guy. He's from Metairie, Louisiana. But we appreciate Glenn coming down and joining us on the program tonight. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. As always, I'd like to start off talking a little bit about what you guys are involved in, and congratulations, Jude. CrestCitySports.com off to a great start. Great, obviously great content. Why don't you break it down for us? Let us know about the radio, everything you're involved in.
Yeah, we're thrilled about CrescentCitySports.com, bringing you high school, college, and pro coverage. And I think what we do uniquely well is on the high school level, giving you great analysis and live football games in particular. Like this week, we have two great ones. Friday night, it's Edna Carr and De La Salle, two powers, Carr defending state champion, and then maybe the two best passing games in the state on Saturday night. Maybe while you're watching LSU at Mississippi State, you can peek on the computer when Rummel hosts Riverside at Yenny at 7 o'clock. Again, live in HD, great coverage on the website as well. Talking Saints, yes, the dark side of it right now, Tigers, Green Wave, you name it. And I'm always busy on the side with WGSO on Tuesday and Wednesday nights from 6 to 7 p.m., the Jude Young Show. Welcome to have you listen and call into that program as well.
Also, don't forget about the prep on WGSO on Friday nights.
Oh, no doubt about it. We have the best scoreboard in the state on CrescentCitySports.com, presented by the Allstate Sugar Bowl. Because of Ken Trahan's original prep football report, WGSO is the flagship. It's on 10 stations around the state, covering every market from 6 with the countdown show, then 7 to 11, reports from dozens of games around the state, as well as the best analysis, and it all starts on WGSO, 990 AM and WGSO.com.
Nobody covers prep better. No, I mean, that's the best prep show, hands down, in the state, no doubt about it. Congratulations. Glenn, welcome back. Thanks again for coming down and joining us here on the show. Tell us a little bit about Gannett News, how folks can catch all your writings.
Well, first of all, fans can watch the Rummel game and peek at the LSU game. So let's just get that out there.
Hey, I love that priority.
That's a Rummel way to talk it. So I can boast a little bit now because De La Salle's back on top. Although my brother's going to have a problem this week, who graduated from De La Salle and is a teacher at Carr. So he's going to have a little split allegiance there this weekend.
I'm not going to say anything about Jesuit because you can look at their record and know why.
LSU Beat tweet on Twitter and on Facebook, and I'm at the advertiser.com, usatoday.com, and in New Orleans, WWLTV.com, covering LSU mainly right now and getting ready to cover the Saints. Not this weekend because I'll still be in Mississippi, but we'll be covering the Saints, hopefully, if a season develops.
Yes.
But big game in a couple of nights in Starkville. And LSU looks really good so far.
Yeah, it did. We'll get to that in a moment. Well, 29-19, Saints go down on Monday night to Minnesota Vikings. You know, to say that the Saints sucked all the optimism out of the Saints fans and out of the city and the state and those that love the Saints across the country, I say would be an understatement. Because, I mean, I think a lot of people were really excited about going into this season. You know, I was talking before the show, and, you know, the one thing about TV and radio and, of course, writing on a newspaper, you know, there's no getting away from what you've said and what you predicted. And, you know, I went through my hot takes after the Houston Texans game. D is better, linebackers playing much better, smart team, high football IQ. Look, first of all, I think they got out-coached on both sides of the ball. But also the mental errors we saw, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it made you feel like the Saints were the same old Saints on defense. I'll take you first. I mean, from so much optimism to on Tuesday, I mean, people are just pretty much giving up. Obviously, it's a long season. I think you can get a little bit maybe too excited if they win or maybe a little too much down if they lose in the first game. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but wasn't a good showing against the Vikings.
No doubt. And you weren't necessarily wrong, your thoughts after the Texans game, because I think we talk about in South Louisiana, how do you make a good meal, right? You got to have great ingredients, and then the recipe has to work together. You have to have the right parts, a pinch of this and a dash of that. And unfortunately for the Saints, the raw ingredients were better, and we saw that in the preseason, but you don't see how the recipe comes together until the game counts.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in a couple of areas, particularly in the defensive secondary, they're more talented, but that talent did not mix well and far too many mental errors. So you've got to turn that around quickly, obviously, this week against the Patriots, but we're looking back at the Vikings still, and what we saw was an okay passing game, torched them, and mostly because of their own mistakes. So they need to, if it's simplify it, that's fine. Even against the Tom Brady, minimize your mistakes. Whatever Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator has to do, he needs to do it, because Sam Bradford is not Tom Brady, and Tom Brady is 0-1, and they need that victory as much as the Saints do.
Although Bradford did his
Yes,
best
he sure
impersonation of Tom Brady, didn't he?
Well, as I was saying earlier, it's the best performance by a bad quarterback against the Saints in a home opener since Bob Berry of the Atlanta Falcons, 62-7.
And we were there.
In 1973. I mean, Bradford has been an awful quarterback, and even when he's good, he's a little dink and dunk quarterback. I mean, he looked like Tom Brady
he really
in that
did.
game, and Thielen has a career high 9 catches. It was ridiculous, and you know what you explained. It was a chef problem,
Right.
In that opener, but you know I think the offense moved the ball. They had red zone problems, but I think that's going to be fixed. The most disappointing thing was how the defense let a makeshift offensive line playing together for the first time. They had no pass rush.
None.
That was awful. And you know they just say it every year, and it doesn't get better. And you know I think what happens to the Saint Nation now is everything is residual, because you know 3 straight 7-9 seasons in 4 and 5 years. So when you've done that and then you start off like this, you think it's going to happen again. Whereas if they were coming off a good season, they might be, oh well, look, you know, we could be 2-2 or
it's
something
one
like
game.
that. But they're not thinking like that.
No,
you
they're
know,
not.
and I don't think that some of the veteran Saint players are either. They'll tell you that, but you know, it's just tough where they are to have a first game like that.
It really is, and the mental. You know, one thing that I kind of talked about during the preseason consistently was the high football IQ. We didn't see a lot of mental errors, blown assignments in preseason, and that's really on both sides of the ball. And I'm not talking about the guys that now are bagging groceries at Dornax. I'm talking about guys that were legitimately going to make this team, and you knew they were going to play. I mean, P.J. Williams might still be searching for someone to cover right now.
Right.
Okay? I mean, Devontae Harris, which again leads you to the question, which has been asked all week long, why isn't Sterling more in the game? Why did he not get any playing time? Why are linebackers covering wide receivers? Sure. Klein, Monte Teo. I mean, Klein, thank God Klein was there on Monday night. He was the best player on the field for the defense outside of Cam Jordan. And even then, they had Cam Jordan backing into coverage and Onyemata backing into coverage. Man, Cam Jordan needs to be rushing the passer every time he's on the field. Sometimes you get a little bit too cute. When you start talking about the scheme. So, You know, a lot of this, I think, has to be put on Dennis Allen and his preparation and getting this team ready.
Look, sometimes the most important thing you do is self-scout. You've got to know what your weaknesses are and cover them up. If you're not elite everywhere, and there aren't too many defenses in the NFL who can come close to that, Saints certainly aren't one of them. What we saw was a lot of confusion on combination routes, just blowing assignments completely, guys pointing and looking at each other with open receivers down the field, and getting those matchups. Look, Minnesota didn't know exactly what they were going to see from this grouping of personnel in 3 lines of defense, but they knew if you can get Manti Te'o in coverage, it's a win for the offense. They knew that you've got Marshawn Lattimore making his NFL debut. You've got the same with Marcus Williams at safety. You've got Devontae Harris, who played last year, but not much from scrimmage, and an undrafted free agent at that. And P.J. Williams, I think, has made 3 starts in his career.
Yeah.
So you add all that up. They knew they had inexperience. They were going to see if they could force those mistakes. When they got those opportunities with linebackers and coverage, they took advantage of that as well. And if you're Dennis Allen, you've got to be smarter about knowing how to avoid that. Really surprised we didn't see that big nickel look a lot more with the 3 safeties. If you didn't want to put Sterling Moore on the field to give some relief to Devontae Harris, then go ahead and put Von Bell out there a little bit.
Or Raphael Bush.
Or Raphael Bush, even, who you brought back, who's an experienced hand, who may not make plays, but he's not going to make boneheaded mistakes that get you beat. We might see some of that this week, but they stuck with it for 60 minutes. They left Harris out there. They let their personnel learn on the job and fail. Now they have to come back and have a combination of those guys improve and get better, and maybe that'll happen. We saw Kenny Vaccaro taking a leadership role this week, forcing all of his teammates in the secondary to come in on their day off and work. That's leadership. They need that because, like you guys mentioned, I think the veterans on that team that have been around a while, the Cam Jordans and Drew Breeses of the world, I know you've touched on that on social media, they've got to be awfully disappointed. If they were enthusiastic going into Minnesota, they had to be shaking their heads saying, same old Saints, like a lot of fans out there were.
You know, another thing that I noticed was the inability to get push up the middle. You know, we talked all season long about the loss of Nick Fairley, and of course that Onyemata and Davidson and Rankins would have to step up. And it was really one play where really Rankins flashed. Other than that, you know, again, no push up the middle. And that's one thing that when you saw this defense playing better last year, they got that push up the middle from Nick Fairley. We didn't see that on Monday night.
No. It looked a lot like a preseason first game than a regular season first game, and it looked like the starters weren't in the game, but they were, and it was a regular season game. and you know, that's great. Kenny Vaccaro took some leadership steps there, but he did not play well. You know, and you know, when the veterans don't play well, it really was a strange game. I think it was poorly executed, poorly coached. I was saying earlier, it looks like Minnesota worked on that game for 6 weeks, and the Saints might have worked on it for a week. That's what it looked like. So maybe things will even out now that it's just down to week to week. But the defensive coordinator needs to get much better.
Yeah, you know, I mean, Klein, Jordan, Morstead, Lutz, Fleener. I mean, you could talk about Unger and the right guard,
Larry Warford.
Larry Warford. Other than that, I mean, Breeze was Breeze. I mean, can you really look at any other players that really stuck out that had really good games at this point?
Well, Tommy Lee Lewis made a big play and was open for a touchdown on the one pass down the field.
Right.
Breeze missed on a drive. They had to settle for a field goal, which was a theme for the offense. But yeah, you don't have a lot of guys that you can say played well. I think that Alex Anzalone, as a rookie linebacker, played really well for a rookie. By comparison, extremely well, and he's got a bright future. I believe they're going to be a lot better at linebacker over the next 15 games. But again, if your secondary is making those kind of mistakes and making them quickly, first 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, and there's confusion, quarterback's going to find that. And it doesn't matter if you do hit him. A couple times when Bradford was getting hit, it didn't matter because guys were open by 3 or 4 steps. Any good pro quarterback's going to make those plays. So now what do? You play in Tom Brady, but his receivers outside of Brandon Cooks, who's going to come in here breathing fire, they're not exactly the most dangerous bunch. You're much more worried about Rob Gronkowski as the elite player in that passing game.
Who had a bad game.
Yeah, so he's probably going to look to fire as well. So you wonder what the Saints are going to do personnel-wise. Do you keep it simple? Marshawn Lattimore, we knew from the preseason, much more comfortable in man coverage than understanding NFL zones. It looks like P.J. Williams, Marcus Williams having the same problem. I'd like to see more of that 3-safety look. Let Marcus Williams be a reacting center fielder who can make plays on the ball down the field. Let your 2 starting corners, who are your best options by far, maybe just match up in man coverage, press at the line of scrimmage, and not think so much and try to make plays. Because when it comes down to it, when these guys were asked to think, they failed miserably, and it's hard to expect in 6 days that much improvement.
Well, that's the key there. Again, 11 days for the New England Patriots, 6 days for the Saints to turn this thing around with a very young team, okay? You're looking at guys over the last 2 years, the roster turnover that we've seen. You got a lot of first-year guys, second-year guys. You got guys that might be in their third year, but they didn't play a lot because of injury. So now all of a sudden you're trying to circle the wagons in just a short amount of time.
Well, to me, it looks like the Saints need to spend most of this week in the film room and studying film, and they've been practicing plenty. You got to get on the field some. I think practice can be overrated there, but I think this was a poorly coached game on especially Dennis Miller, but Dennis Allen. Looked like Dennis Miller.
Right, exactly.
And Coach Payton, as great a play caller he is, I thought some of his red zone calls, they're usually great at the short passes for touchdowns, and it looked like they got away from that a little too much. We're trying to run the ball a little too much down there, and just couldn't get it in either way. So both coaches, coordinator and head coach, need to get a little better there.
And I think you got to kind of take them to task a little bit for going into this game with only 2 legitimate tackles.
Right.
Bryce Harris gets cut. I was a little surprised, and I said this at the end of the preseason. I thought they would go out and they would find at least a couple of offensive linemen, veteran offensive linemen, to come in and back up, at least until Teron Armstead came back. And, of course, the worst possible thing that could happen was Zach Strief goes out with the MCL injury, and then the offense seemed to go into a shell.
Right.
Okay, and they weren't prolific. You could see that Brees didn't have time. At times he was rolling away from not the right side, but the left side of the line where, Andres Pete cannot get dominated at the line of scrimmage like he got dominated. And, of course, Ramchak, with a young guy next to him, sometimes he needs the veteran help. And I don't know if Pete is there yet.
No, he wasn't. He, on a couple of occasions during stunts or quick switches that weren't planned, he was not there mentally. Again, mental mistakes, being in the right spot to help. I thought Ramchak had a much better game, probably graded out a lot better than Pete, who was clearly the worst offensive lineman. Even Senio Calamete, who was not a
give him a lot of credit, right?
Yeah, he gave them a chance because the Saints were able to get into that passing groove that Brees can do, even when they're down, and keep them in a ball game, and they were able to move the ball down the field and come up with points. But it all goes back to how you use your personnel. Early in the game, I understand you're on the road, you have respect for Minnesota's defense and a loud environment in prime time, and you're trying to run the football and shorten that game, which is smart. But at the same time, once you get inside the red zone, I don't know if being tricky with a trap play, going to the teeth of their defense, the strength of their defense on 3rd and goal from the 4 makes a whole lot of sense. If you're going to run any of your receivers that are active, or even using Kamara in that role in the slot, to go to the goal line, turn around and catch a pass low, it shouldn't be 6'5" Brandon Coleman, who has questionable hands to begin with. At one point when you're struggling in the red zone, maybe throw it up to the back pylon and give him a chance to make a play with his skill set.
Yes.
So I'm sure Sean Payton looked back and saw some areas where we didn't cash in, not so much because we didn't execute, but maybe I didn't give our team the best chance for individuals to match up well and make plays.
I thought after Zach Strief got hurt, you could almost tell it was like they wanted to make sure they didn't get Drew hurt.
Yes.
So they kind of did go into
They circled the wagons
on
there,
purpose.
right? Yeah, no, they did.
That might have been a smart move.
Right.
Too.
Well, it may have been for the whole season. We're going to get to Brees in a few minutes. But the route running was not there. This is a timing offense. You've got to be at a specific spot. You've got to get off the jam, and you got a precise route running. Hey, Willie Snead was missed.
Yeah, it seems like Brees has got to break in new receivers every year, and it just doesn't look like they have it together yet. And the passing game was not there. I think part of it was the protection after Zach, but Brees looked a little off because the receivers were off.
Right. And I thought the tight ends played pretty well.
They played very well, considering what they expected. They thought that was the weakest part of their skill position on offense, and it probably still is, but not if Kobe Fleener plays like he played this week. Finally looked like he deserved the money they paid him 2 off seasons ago. So that was encouraging, and he made clutch catches in the red zone, which was nice to see. But Michael Thomas is going to be public enemy number 1 to every defense, and they're going to do what they can to shut him down. There's only so much scheme-wise you can do to get him the football if the opposing secondary isn't as friendly as the Saints were blowing coverages against Stephon Diggs, for example. But they've got to find other guys. 2 more games without Willie Snead, and a crucial part in the season at the beginning that we knew would be tough. You know Ted Ginn brings pluses and minuses, but precise route running and clutch hands aren't there for him, so you have to limit what you do with him. I want to see a little bit more of Tommy Lee Lewis because I think he's showing he might be able to carry over a lot of what he did in the preseason. And like I said before, if you're going to play Brandon Coleman, use him properly. Give him the opportunity to make plays down the field where, hey, guys are covered. That's a guy who can jump up and make a play for you at the very least. It's not the best personnel Breeze has ever had to work with in the passing game, and if the Saints can't do that, they can't win.
And I kind of felt a little bit like Peyton didn't have a real feel for his running back group as well. You know, almost like trying to force Adrian Peterson into the game and trying to get him off. You know, I've said since the beginning, I don't know how he works in this offense. He's a high volume guy. He's got to get the ball a lot. You know, once he starts getting a few carries, then he'll break off a run here or there. I'm just, you know, I was skeptical in the beginning when he came here. And then I just wonder how him and Ingram will coexist, especially with Kamara now emerging as a guy that can run between the tackles and catch the football.
Yeah, and Kamara is just like the perfect back for Peyton. To me, I felt like the defense was a surprise how much they gave to Minnesota early in the game, and I think that kind of caught Peyton off guard. You know, maybe he wasn't expecting that type of game right off where he'd have to outscore him. I mean, he's definitely used to that over the years, but I think he must have thought the defense was going to be better. You saw early they were using AP a lot. That could have worked well in a lower scoring game if they'd have kept up with it. And then, like you said, use them as a decoy when they need to throw the ball. But I'd like to see more of Adrian. I thought he had a decent start. I just have a lot of respect for him. You know, it is tough to get him in if, you know, with an offensive line that may be struggling, but I'd like to see more of him.
Well, it was 80-20 last year when you talk about Ingram to Hightower.
Right.
And traditionally it's been like 80-20. You know, maybe when you had Pierre Thomas back there, you might have upped it a little bit, maybe a 60-40 split, depending on who that other running back was. But, I mean, there's not just a bell cow running back in this particular offense.
And the real problem is you're bringing Peterson in really to fill a role that guys like Chris Ivory, Kyrie Robinson, go back to the Super Bowl year, Mike Belfield, which not featured backs, but situational backs and pound out a lead in the fourth quarter. That's not what Adrian Peterson came here to do. At the very least, he came here to be a co-featured back and have a lot of touches and be out there even in obvious passing situations. But I believe it was 4 of the first 5 times he was on the field for a play, they gave him the football. You mentioned it before the show. We didn't see play action out of him when the game was under control for the first quarter and a half. So, I mean, the Saints need to be much more selective about if you're going up against a top 5 defense against the run from last year and they have pretty much the same personnel. If the run's not happening early and you start to fall from behind, you've got to shift your game plan and hope that Peterson's okay with it, because it doesn't add up that he would be on the field ahead of Ingram or Kamara, because both of them are much more complete backs for what the Saints need. Now, is he going to be happy with this if that's the norm more often than not for the next 15 games? Probably not. And Sean Payton should have known that ahead of time and should have communicated that to Peterson, because if he was coming here to win a ring, he might be leaving awfully disappointed.
Yeah, well, there's no kind especially after game 1, that's for sure. You know, guys, you guys have covered the Saints, LSU, you know, Tulane for a long time. You know, when I had a chance to be out at the facility, you know, one of the things I like to do in press conferences is watch body language, you know, more than just to be able to hear the coach speak or the player speak. You really kind of get much more out of a body language. And I mentioned something on social media today, and I'd like to get you guys' take on it. I mean, 12 years of watching Drew Brees press conferences, either being there or you know, watching them on video or listening to them on the audio. And I kind of sense a little bit of a change. I expected a more fired up Brees after the Monday night loss than what we got. You know, it was kind of like, you know, well, it's one game, and he was just, I mean, he was very tempered in what he had to say. His press conference this week, it seemed just his voice, again, very, very low-key, kind of nonchalant almost. You know, I'm around like you, going back to the Archie Manning days, and I remember Manning getting beat up week after week after week. I remember Manning having to sit in that cubbyhole, and every single week, reporters with the mic in front of him. He was the guy that had to talk about everything that went wrong with those Saints. We're now, for the last 5 years, at 7-9 for a guy that has won his entire career. And I know in the past he's tried to put a very positive spin on everything. I just kind of get the feeling that losing is kind of getting to him at this point.
It has to be.
Okay, and you know, for Saints fans that revere and love this guy, I mean, I just get the feeling that if this is the year, okay, one way or the other, $18 million in dead money, and if this team doesn't turn it around and looks like it's going to either make the playoffs or be a team that can be a contender, we may have seen the last of Drew Brees. I just think that at some point, when you get to this point in your career, I think you want to have the opportunity to win another Super Bowl or be in contention. And 7-9, I don't think will cut it with Brees anymore. I think it's starting to wear on him.
And Drew Brees is somebody who I think could give lessons on public relations. When it comes to being an NFL quarterback, he's perfected what you need to do in front of the microphone and the camera. So that tells you how surprised he was by the performance of his teammates after that game. And that's a very bad sign, because if he's showing a little bit of the wear and tear emotionally, then it tells you that locker room could turn pretty sour quickly if they get off to a slow start and maybe not be able to rally and stay competitive. You know, he's gotten them back to 500 middle to 3/4 of the way through the season despite falling behind record-wise. This time around, guys, I mean, he knows. We've all known. We've been talking about it since they made the purge, traded Jimmy Graham and getting rid of Junior Gillette and realizing we got to reshape this locker room. We've drafted poorly. We've got to do better there and get younger. This was the season that it was pointed to once Sean Payton re-upped and said he was sticking around. And the preseason gave that optimism. I think Drew Brees is extremely disappointed in what he saw out there in Minnesota. And if they don't bounce back and show significant improvement on Sunday afternoon and they lose and the defense performs poorly, this thing could turn sour fast, because there's no mercy coming at Carolina.
Right.
And if you're not fired up to play and focused going all the way to London to play a game after that, you could be 0-4, season over and regime over.
Right. I agree with the regime over as well. Look, you've watched a lot of Saints football. You and I both remember Archie Manning in that cubicle, taking all those questions. Archie Manning couldn't go anywhere. Okay, there was no free agency back then. No. He was stuck here until they traded him.
Yeah, and he showed up for everything press conference.
But Brees has an opportunity to get out this year if things don't go well.
Yeah, and I wrote last year that he owes it to himself to go somewhere else, to the right situation, because the management of this team, the ownership of this team, and the way, and 7-9, they're not good enough for Drew Brees. Where would those 7-9s be for the last 5 years without Drew Brees?
Oh, it'd be 3 wins.
Yeah, it'd be 3 or 4 wins.
If you saw the Colts at the Rams this past weekend without Andrew Luck, that gives you an idea of what it'll be like.
So, and I mean, I think, Brees is a human being. How many times can he say the same thing? He's just got 7-9 on his forehead. He's been through it. He knows that that's probably what's going to happen. And he's got to play his butt off to make that happen.
Right.
Is probably what's going through his mind. And, I think he can be excused if he's not, doing the big cheerleader thing in the press conference. But he'll be ready to play.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
He's a professional.
He's a competitor.
Yeah, he's a competitor. He's a professional. He's got integrity. He'll be ready to play. But, even he's probably not believing what he's saying half the time, when you go 7-9 that many times. So I would like, if the Saints have another season like that, I would like to see him play on another team that has it together. In fact, when Archie was getting at the end of his career, I wanted to see him on another team because I knew they weren't going to win here.
Right.
And
it didn't happen.
He showed up in Houston 2 years too late.
And then he goes to Minnesota, which had been winning, and then all of a sudden they weren't any good.
No doubt about it. Guys, it was more, again, body language, just the voice. And look, it could be different over the next couple of weeks. But it's got to wear. It's wearing on the fans.
Oh, yeah,
okay, you don't think it's going to wear on the best player on the field? It's got to wear on you. Again, it really does. All right, short week, New England. They got the real Tom Brady this time coming into the Dome. Jude, your thoughts?
Well, I said it earlier. I think in this matchup, when you look at a bunch of young and or okay receivers who are decent enough and can beat you, and Brandon Cooks, that, hey, start playing guys in more simplified roles, try to match up, go more man-to-man. If you're not going to get pressure on the quarterback with 4, bring more and make Brady get rid of the football. He may burn you, but if we see what we saw Monday night, he's going to burn you anyway. So try to give yourself a chance to make some plays there and you know, keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes you got to do that, especially when you're young and you've got so much youth in that secondary. On the flip side, like Glenn said, the offense is going to show up. I don't think New England can fix 42 points given up to Alex Smith at home, even with the extra few days to try to turn this around. They know they're coming to the Dome, and they're probably anticipating a shootout at this point. So I think the offense will show up, and they'll have more success. I don't think the Patriots are as good of a defense right now as Minnesota Vikings, who were underrated because of how bad their offense was last year. That's a team that could go to the playoffs. New England's going to go to the playoffs, but the Saints matchup-wise have a chance to win a shootout. I don't see any other scenario but a shootout win if the Saints expect to come away 1-1.
Your take, Glenn?
If I was the Saints, I would watch the film of the Chiefs game and not the Falcons game in the Super Bowl. And you know, the first time Belichick won the Super Bowl, I think he went 7-9 the next year. You know, they might just not be that good right now.
Well, they're definitely injured.
Right.
Yeah, they're injured, and you know and you know, you think Belichick, he's going to make the adjustments and everything, but you know, he's human too, and you know, I think the Saints are going to have a chance to win this game. And they really need to, and it would be a huge emotional lift to come off and beat the Super Bowl champions.
Well, all would be forgiven.
Be 1-1, yeah, and they'd be right back where they were when the season opened. So it's a huge game, and I think they have a shot because New England does not look as good to me as Minnesota did, and the Saints were a couple of red zone better play calls away from being in that game.
Right, Drew Brees always gives you a chance, but I'll say this, out of any stat you could look at after the game, and we don't know how it's going to play out, if you have fantasy football pundits talking about Chris Hogan, remember that name, like they were talking about Adam Thielen after Minnesota, the Saints are going to lose.
Yes.
They've absolutely got to stop these slot receivers they're going to face, and New England's down to their third best option there because of injuries to Julian Edelman and now Danny Amendola. They're really young at receiver outside of Cooks. So if your young guys can't match up with their young guys and give yourself a chance to win at home, home opener, really kind of feeling like the season's on the line. If they don't show up, oh boy.
Yes.
to the Saints fan, this is like a December game to get into the playoffs.
No doubt.
To go 8-8, like when Anderson kicked the field goal.
Exactly. I'm telling you.
This game is.
Look,
they need to market it.
Look, I'm saying what you just said from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I mean, literally. The
elimination game.
You could feel the deflation of the entire city and all Saints fans everywhere after that game on Monday. No one anticipated that beatdown.
Right.
And look,
right.
I don't want to hear about the touchdown at the end or again the fantasy football yards. You know, they just made it look good on the scoreboard and the stat sheet. They got beat, and they got beat bad.
They did.
Let's take a quick break here. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com and WGSO Radio, and Glenn Guilbeau of Gannett News are our guests tonight. We'll be talking LSU when we come back. We'll get to Tulane. We'll get to your phone calls as well. Don't go anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special, and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. With us tonight, Glenn Guilbeau of Gannett News and Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and WGSO Radio. LSU 45-10 beating Chattanooga. I don't want to spend too much time on Chattanooga, but your thoughts on the game?
Well, I think LSU, I think they looked the best on both sides of the ball than at any time since '07. They won the national championship that year. This team is not as good as that team, but they seem to be moving along well on both sides of the ball, and I think you saw that against Chattanooga and BYU. Neither of those teams have great defenses, but LSU's played bad teams in other seasons and didn't look this good. So I think there's a lot of reason for high hopes for this team. Mississippi State's good, but I really like what's going on offensively. Danny Etling looks better. He's the third-ranked efficiency quarterback in the SEC. LSU usually doesn't have a guy that high. The deep receiving game looks good. They're running the ball well. The offensive line, to me, is kind of iffy, but the coordinator they have, Matt Canada, is perfect at the finesse game and hiding his weaknesses. And, Dave Aranda's got a bunch of freshmen playing on defense, and they look great. So they're looking pretty good. Yeah,
we're going to get back to specifics in a moment. Your thoughts on that game?
Well, I've got to start this segment with the food analogy again, I think. I mean, that was as vanilla as it gets game plan-wise for LSU, yet it was efficient. There were a couple of breakdowns, maybe one in the secondary in the second half, and Grant Delpit will learn from that. But otherwise, this was not the dynamic movement that we normally see from a
vanilla defense.
Vanilla total on both sides of the ball.
Well, they threw the ball deeper.
Yeah,
than
they did. But again,
they're hiding stuff
as far as what they showed pre-snap. And I think it's important to know that they were able to do that and still execute and be efficient and build upon their performance in certain areas from BYU where they weren't as efficient on offense, and they finished off drives in the red zone pretty well once they got there. Even against the Chattanooga, you want to see that even if you're not trying to fool your opponent like you do one that you would respect. Now, to the big picture, there's a lot of parallels to what we talked about with the Saints. The preseason's over for LSU. I mean, they've got a couple more layups, I guess you could say, at home, but this is an SEC game on the road, and now we'll find out what they really have, and they can't afford to have mistakes against what Nick Fitzgerald and what a good offensive-minded coach like Dan Mullen can throw at a young defense, how they'll do in a hostile environment for the first time, because we worried about young guys playing in the secondary and young depth or lack thereof everywhere, but they really stepped up against two bad teams. Now they need to continue that. So we'll see how that goes, but it looks like they have the talent and guys that are going to come along pretty quickly. First-year guys that are doing it. And then on offense, I have a lot of faith in Matt Canada. And what you said about Etling, even again in preseason-type LSU games, usually don't have the numbers of a quarterback efficiency-wise and throwing the ball enough to be effective and spreading the ball around. That's what you expected from Canada. You have to be excited about it. And I'm, something that's underrated. I'm thrilled to see what they've got from Darrell Williams as a backup running back because you were so worried that you had nothing behind a guy as talented as Darius Geis. If he gets hurt like Fournette got hurt last year, you could all go up in flames, but you have a young man who got himself in shape to fit. Hey, you've got to be in shape to move around and play in a Canada offense. It's really exciting when you see all the pieces together. It looks like they have enough depth to go through an SEC schedule and win. But again, until we see them perform at Mississippi State, it's an incomplete grade. It's very much like four Saints preseason games until we see if they can go to Starkville, a 2-0 team that believes, based on the last 3 years, that they can compete with and beat LSU.
Lend your thoughts on Jude's points.
Well, I thought the offense was not nearly as vanilla as it was against BYU because they threw the ball deep a lot. And not only just threw it, they completed passes deep. And the most impressive thing to me was, in college, you can get by if you have a decent quarterback. Alabama's won national championships with average to decent quarterbacks. And if you have great receivers who can make the quarterback look better. And that's exactly what they did. Stephon Sullivan and DJ Chark were not that open on some of those completions. They just out-athleted the guys next to him. And Etling didn't throw the ball perfectly, but he got it out there close enough. And that's a good sign, because if he can keep doing that, then they're going to be a lot more versatile than they have been. And they're not, they don't have a fullback anymore. They're using one-back sets with Geis. And he's got a lot more room back there. So, and I tell you, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a very good back too. You're going to see more of him. DJ Chark looks great on the punt returns, and on the receptions. I think it's kind of building, but you'll see a little bit more offense, less vanilla from Canada this week.
Right. To clarify what I meant by that is the movement that we normally see. LSU is pretty straightforward, but you're right about throwing the ball down the field, and that's so encouraging after so many years of Les Miles. Against BYU,
he threw it downfield. They just didn't catch
right,
it.
Exactly. But what they didn't do is game one, BYU knew they had a speed deficit, especially on the back end of their defense. They didn't want to give up big plays down the field, and they played 6 in the box a lot. And people were saying this is the same LSU running the ball on every play, but it's taking what the defense gives you. Chattanooga had a different feeling. They knew they'd get blown off the ball. They didn't want to die by paper cuts. They came up a little bit more, so they paid down the field. Now, Les Miles would have said, we're going to still run into that 8-man front every single time, and we're just going to out-tough you. Canada's going to have his quarterback make RPOs at the line of scrimmage, make the decisions, audibles, and the right plays sets to give your athletes a chance to make plays. That was what was encouraging, while still running kind of a basic offense, not near as much as the shifting we saw against BYU. Right. You're going to see a lot of it because it's so important to try to confuse a defense before the snap to win a play. And that's something LSU wasn't doing with their basic offense for so many years. Now they can do that and give the DJ Charks of the world a chance to get one-on-one matchups where he doesn't have to be open. He just has to have one guy to beat, and that athlete can win that battle for you.
Glenn, offensive line going against the Mississippi State defense. Obviously, again, one thing that I think a lot of us were going to be curious to see how this young offensive line will match up against SEC defenses as we go forward this season.
Well, State's got a new defensive coordinator, and Todd Grantham's been in the NFL, was at Louisville. They're at the top of the stats in the SEC in sacks. They haven't played great teams, but there's some talent on defense there, and it's going to be a challenge for KJ Malone on the left side, and they got a freshman at guard, and either Ed Ingram or Sadiq Charles. So it's going to be a big test for them. And Ed has said, Coach Orgeron has said this too. Edling, he was sacked a couple times last week, but for the most part, he hasn't really been pressured that much. And he's going to have some pressure in this game, and he kind of wilted under the pressure against Alabama last year. It affected his throwing later in the game. So it's going to be a big test for Danny to continue to complete passes as he has. And LSU's, they've put together a nice little play action game in both of these games. You don't really know when they're going to run or pass as much as you used to. So it's going to be interesting to see if Canada can keep that up in this game against Mississippi State, figure out a way to protect the quarterback and put in some new wrinkles.
One of the problems they're having right now, obviously, is with place kicking, the ability to make kicks. And I know they had a competition between Connor Culp and Jack Oslin. Do we know who ultimately won that battle?
It's still going on. I think Ed might have him out there right now.
He might be poorly timed. I think it's his press conference right now after that.
How do you get to this point? Connor Culp came out of high school as one of the top kickers in high school. Okay? Right. When he signed with LSU.
Yeah, and they kicked really well in preseason camp. But it's a lot different out there on the field and now they're going to one of the loudest places to play, not necessarily because of the attendance, but they have this monster speakers up there.
Plus the cowbells.
Yeah, and not to mention the cowbells. So there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I heard they were thinking of bringing just one kicker, but they need to bring both kickers.
they might have to go to the stands and get some kickers if he keeps up this way.
But it's something you never really can. Coaches have trouble trying to fix a kicker. It's just so arbitrary.
But you can't have that in SEC play.
No.
You can't get to the point where you can't count on your kicker 45 yards and in, right?
I thought what stood out, though, is Culp may have missed one field goal, but it was right down the middle and a little short from, it was either the 45 or the 47 yard. He made one and missed the other. But both the kicks were true. His extra points were true. So if that momentum carried over this week, you feel like he's the guy you gave a scholarship to, the hometown kid from Catholic High, and Gonsolin may have won it in camp, but Sean Payton told us this week how Devontae Harris outplayed Sterling Moore throughout training camp. But, once the real bullets are flying, go with the guy that you had more confidence in to begin with, who's played, in the league in the Saints case. But obviously in this case, the guy you gave a scholarship to, believe in him and give him the next chance, because Gonsolin has been inaccurate. It's one thing to be short on a long field goal, but inaccurate. Now, again, practice counts, and Ed Orgeron making it feel game-like. Treat this like a game because whoever does perform does get the job. We have to trust him on that, and these are the type of big decisions that the CEO has to be able to make and get right, because if they lose a game because of the kicking game, there's going to be anger at the kicker who does it and anger at the head coach who chose him to kick it.
10 penalties in the first half, 1 in the second half. They seem to clean it up. Had penalties against BYU as well. They can't afford that against SEC opponents. No,
21 penalties in 2 games. But again, I think that's something that can be cleaned up. And I don't think the kicking is as bad as it seems. I mean, they each have made a field goal. It might develop Orgonsolin as your short kicker and Culp's your long kicker. But I think the penalties will be fixed. You know, some of that's some young players in the offensive line, and also you know, a new offense. But that needs to be cleaned up, and you know, Mississippi State's got a dangerous offense. They got Arden Key back.
Yes.
That's going to help with the pass rush against a dynamic dual threat quarterback in Nick Fitzgerald. They may not have Rashard Lawrence, their best defensive lineman, though he's making the trip.
But can I ask a question about that? Because you know, I would think that if ultimately he can't go this week, then you probably hold him out for the next couple of weeks, right? You want him to heal completely. You don't want to rush him back, do you?
Right. Yeah. He's got an ankle, and they play Troy and who else?
Syracuse coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can hold him out a little bit before the next.
I mean, you really want him for the stretch run of the SEC, right?
Right. And they've got some depth on the defensive line, and they've got some depth at linebacker. But it's going to be good to see Key back, and now he's up about 265. They don't like him up that high. It's strange that he took the spring drills off too. But Caleb Vaughn Chasson already has 2 sacks. I mean, he's going to be subbing with Arden. So and then Corey Thompson's on the other side, leading the SEC with 3.5 sacks. So they've been looking good on defense.
I think they need Key, like you said, because of his weight and being away for so long, still to play himself into shape. He needs these reps leading up to the Auburns and the Floridas of the world.
So the next 3 weeks critical for him.
Yeah, and he's going to get probably limited snaps against Mississippi State, but if you use him in short bursts, he still has that natural ability, and he can help you out, and he's an experienced hand on the road as well, while you're going with a lot of freshmen on the defensive ends. Otherwise, you're without Rashard Lawrence this week at defensive tackle, who's a real playmaker there, so you're lucky you have a lot of veteran experience at that spot. So yeah, having every veteran possible for that first road game, and it's an SEC game against a team that should not be taken lightly. I can't stress enough, if you went back and watched, because I recorded and made a point to watch what was a wild game, 50-plus points at La Tech, wild house in Ruston, second highest attendance ever, so it wasn't an easy place to go play against a good offense, but they forced turnovers, they blocked a couple of kicks. Mississippi State made plays in every aspect of the game, and it showed you they have a lot of athletes and more than they've had.
Kicked the ball on a turnover, too.
Yeah, it's true, and they had the wildest fumble since Archie Manning in NFL films that was set up
and Glenn and I were there for that, too.
Yes, we were.
Third and goal from your own 7, a tough call to have to make. That was the night it was for La Tech. LSU's obviously better, but that says a lot about how good Mississippi State is talent-wise. They've built upon the Dak Prescott era, and they've recruited better, and they probably have a better overall team than they had when Prescott
and
was
Dan
there.
Mullen's probably the best coach in the SEC other than Coach Saban.
Yeah. I gotta mention Greedy Williams. I gotta mention Kerry Vincent.
Yes.
I mean, come on. I mean, look, they got some really good freshmen that are contributing. I mean, across the board. But you really gotta like what you've seen out of those guys.
Yeah, Coach Orgeron said it best at his press conference. You know, Andres Greedy Williams has replaced Kevin Tolliver at cornerback. Right. Tolliver was the number 1 cornerback in the country coming out of Jacksonville. And DJ Chark replaced Dante Jackson as punt returner because Dante fumbled a couple in practice. And somebody asked Ed, you know, how are these guys starting? He said, hey, somebody blinked. You know, Tolliver was suspended for the first game, and Andres took over. And I don't think Tolliver's going to be starting anytime soon. And Andres Greedy Williams, he has 2 interceptions already. He's got a bunch of tackles. He's all over the field. And he's got the kind of mindset and chutzpah. He's not going to be worried in Starkville. Yeah. And they got quite a few freshmen like that.
Let me ask you. Past 2 years, we've heard recruiting has taken somewhat of a downturn. Oh, no, just the 8th ranked recruiting class nationally. It kind of shows you how much that matters when we see all these young, great athletes on the field who look like they're NFL guys.
Well, the problem at LSU has never been recruiting.
Right. Coaching.
Since 2000. Yeah, I mean, LSU has more players in the NFL for like the third or fourth straight year. None of them have any rings.
Is it 50 or 51?
Right now,
51.
opening
51.
day rosters, they just released today. As of right now, opening day, not counting practice squad, LSU and Alabama each with 39. LSU's always around upper 30s and to mid 40s each and every year, and it's been like that, like you said, since the turn of the century.
Yeah,
it's remarkable.
When you count the entire roster.
Everything.
Yeah,
50
sure.
51.
Yeah.
Which again, and look, let me say this. Getting those guys going to the pros and are better in some cases than they were at LSU.
Oh, yeah, look at Russell Shepard.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
unbelievable.
Look at Daniel Hunter last week.
Exactly.
All right, I want to get, we had the full call board. I want to get to it. All right, LSU, Mississippi State.
I think LSU wins a close game by about a touchdown or less.
It's about right. I think a 10 to 7 point win. It won't be incredibly high scoring because I think you'll see a first half very close to the vest, and it'll be big plays in the second half. LSU can make more of them and win the game.
Right. All right, let's head to the phone lines. Brian is in Metairie. Brian, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Brian.
Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Great.
First off, I'm one of those frustrated fans that y'all were talking about. I think going 0-2 could possibly be a disaster for this football team. And you know what? I've seen nothing to give me an idea that they wouldn't go 0-2, possibly 0-4. I saw the same defense I saw last year, just different players. No pass rush to mention. The only problem is you get in the red zone 5 times, you get 3 field goals and a touchdown. That just sealed up fate. I can tell you the best 2 players last week, though, very easily. Your punter and your field goal kicker. Without them, it could have been worse if that's possible.
Yeah, no
I'll
doubt.
hang up and get your comment.
Thank you, Brian. Guys?
What else can you say? It's obvious that there were a lot of deficiencies that mirrored what we saw in the past, and fans are now tired of hearing, well, we've got new, younger, more talented guys to step in. It is crucial right now because we're worried about not only losing the fan base in September, but we've talked about maybe losing the leaders of the team mentally in September.
Right. Renee is on the North Shore. Renee, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Renee.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
This is for the panel I alluded to earlier. I see that Sean Payton's carrying 3 QBs on a roster this year. That might have something to do with the Drew Brees. They might have an answer for that. And my second question is that kid, Caleb Chasson for LSU, he really kind of looked good like for Arden Key. And thank you for taking my call and hang up and listen.
Thanks. Why don't you take the LSU question? Arden Key, Chason.
What was the question about Chason?
I think Chason coming in for Arden Key?
Yeah, Arden Key is going to start, and Chason's been starting in Key's spot, and Chason is going to come in and rotate with Arden Key because Coach Orgeron doesn't feel like Arden can go the whole game. He's going to need a blow. He's a little overweight, not in football shape yet, and Chason's been playing good. So you're probably going to see, maybe close to 50-50 Key and Chason on an outside linebacker.
And Chason could be the next Arden Key, right?
He could.
Yeah.
He could. And it'll be interesting to see what they do when Key gets back into shape where he's playing almost the whole game because Corey Thompson has been very good on the other side. So, Chason might play kind of a wild card role. Could you imagine all 3 of those guys in there? And they have this
White Montgomery
cheetah,
and Mingo era type smaller
the cheetah package
Sure.
they have, so that could make that very interesting.
Take the quarterback question. I know they have Hill. They picked up from was the former BYU quarterback, obviously, and of course Breeze, and of course the perennial backup Chase Daniel.
Right. Ever since they drafted a quarterback in the 3rd round and it didn't work out, you could tell at least they started to think about the future after Drew Brees. And I think that the pickup of Hill and keeping him on the active roster is a real tip of the cap to how good he looked with the Packers. And I loved him in college at BYU. He was a dual threat there, but he looks like he has the ability to develop and run an NFL offense. So that was a real steal, I think, for them to grab. But they had to use a roster spot for him. And the thing about it is Chase Daniel did not look good in the preseason. So I think they're very worried about, unlike when Luke McCown was able to step in last year and almost win you a game on the road, I don't know if they have that same confidence in Daniel. It doesn't look like he's comfortable and efficient enough to run a complicated offense like that. And if the Saints aren't complicated on offense with their personnel like Drew Brees is able to do so much, if Daniel can't do that, they're not going to win much without him.
Speaking of ex-Packers, they lost Max McCaffrey this week. I think was it Jacksonville pulled him off the practice squad, and of course that was somebody we're looking at the wide receiver position. Greg is in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey guys. Obviously, we're all disappointed in the Saints' performance today, but my take on it is I can't understand where's the passion. I mean, if Sean Payton and Rob Ryan were together again, and that disaster on those blown coverages, you would see Sean Payton yelling at Rob Ryan all the time. And yet he doesn't yell at Dennis Allen like it's no big deal. And if he was able to bench Mark Ingram for fumbles, why aren't they benching defensive players and bringing in Sterling Moore or doing something different? I just don't see it from the coach, and I'll hang up and listen.
Guys?
Why did underperforming linebackers for years happen, but yet Joe Vitt always stuck around? Why did we see changes not made in special teams on the defensive line where young players really didn't develop?
His guys?
Yeah, his guys. And Dennis Allen brought back is a Sean Payton guy. So he's going to sink or swim with one of his guys. And he brought Ryan in reluctantly because of reputation and somewhat desperation. Not his guy. Greg Williams, same thing. It worked with Williams. It only worked for a short time with Ryan. That could be looked at perhaps as a deficiency in how the head coach handles the staff, which is just as important as how you handle your roster.
You got to take?
What you were saying about Drew Brees is going through this over and over again.
Yeah.
Sean Payton's been here just as long as Drew Brees.
Let's face it, Drew Brees hasn't flirted with other teams. Payton has.
Yeah, and even though he missed one of the 7 and 9s, he's definitely been there in the last 3, and that's new to him too.
It's his handiwork. I mean, everything. The buck stops with him. This is his team.
Right, and when you've had those type losing seasons, it has an effect on you, and it is early for him to start breathing fire on the sidelines, but I expected a little more of that too.
Especially opening game after what happened during preseason. He might have been as shell shocked as everybody else.
Yeah, I think he was shell shocked by the defense too. Yeah.
Robert is in Metairie. Robert, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Robert.
How you doing, Eric?
Doing great. Thanks for the call.
In 2016, when they gave Sean Payton the extension, I thought it was a bad idea because in 2014 and 2015 he had 2 straight 7 and 9 years. And there's no way I was going to extend because he already had years in the deal. And I think it was a good head coach. I just think the same thing happened to him, happened to Mike Shanahan in Denver, and Andy Reid Philadelphia. I think the shuffle is over. Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, he wants to know about Payton, and look, I think this is a defining year, in my opinion. As hard as it might be for that regime, which is very, very close, to maybe to be able to cut bait with Sean Payton. It may be Sean Payton wanting to move on as well.
It gets stale, and it gets stale on both ends at some point. Great coaches who won Super Bowls and put together consistent winners and play. Bill Walsh got burned out. Mike Shanahan had to leave Denver at one point when it just wasn't working anymore in the building over there. Sometimes you get to that point. Sean Payton has a lot of power on Airline Drive, okay? And as long as that power is still there, he's going to probably be able to make the call unless there's a complete collapse of a season. Even if they go 7 and 9 again, he's going to have some say and how he leaves if he wants to leave or if he wants to stay and maybe even do it without a Drew Brees because he has established that and that trust at the highest levels of the organization. So fans need to deal with that. But trust me, I guarantee you the Bensons at this point and the leadership in that organization know that if the fans show a true turn and anger and they hear that get rid of this coach and they hear it on the airwaves and they see it in the Superdome, that will change as well. In the end, the fans tend to dictate what needs to happen. And if things go sour, the fans are already starting to show quickly that they're ready to be louder than they've been about the leadership on the field.
20 seconds, Glenn. You get the last word.
Tom Benson's never fired a coach that had a 7 and 9 or similar season. It's always like an awful 3 or 2 win season, Mora and Hazlitt. So I think if he goes 7 and 9, I think he's going to come back. And he's making too much money to want to leave that much. He's still got several years on his contract. Right. So they would have to have a really bad season for a move to be made.
Glenn Guilbeau, Jude Young, thanks so much for being on our panel tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. We're on Pelican Sports Television on Friday night at 9 o'clock. We're on the Cox Cable tier now as well. 10 o'clock on Thursdays, 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. Catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That's 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast, ericasher.com. Also, the TuneIn Radio app, a great way to take the show with you anywhere. You can also follow all the episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our guests, Glenn Guilbeau and Jude Young. Also to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Trey Lopez, Kenny Juno, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully we got some great news for you for the Saints next week, and hopefully we'll be able to get to Tulane as well. They're taking on Oklahoma up in Norman. That's going to be a tough one going up there. They're taking on number 2 Oklahoma, and of course the Tigers taking on Mississippi State. Thanks so much for watching. I'm your host Eric Asher. See you next week.